A nurse discovered a dying man on an abandoned highway during a storm. She dressed his wounds without realizing he was something far more dangerous than human. The following evening, 300 figures in black cloaks knelt outside her house, calling her their king's savior. The windshield wiper scraped against the glass in a rhythm that matched Clara's exhausted heartbeat. 12 hours. 12 brutal hours of back-to-back surgeries, code blues, and families weeping in waiting rooms. Her scrubs still carried the faint smell of antiseptic and copper. The storm had transformed the highway into a black mirror, reflecting nothing but her headlights slicing through sheets of rain. Clara's fingers ached around the steering wheel. Just 15 more miles to her cabin. 15 miles to silence, hot tea, and forgetting the boy who had died on her table tonight, despite everything she had done. That was when she saw the wreckage. The SUV had rolled at least twice, judging by the shattered glass carpeting the asphalt. Its underside faced the sky like a dying beetle. Clara's training kicked in before thought could catch up. She slammed the brakes, her sedan hydroplaning before lurching to a stop on the shoulder. "Please don't be dead," she whispered, grabbing her emergency kit from the back seat. The rain soaked through her scrubs in seconds as she ran toward the wreck. Then she saw him. He lay 20 feet from the vehicle, face down in gravel and mud. His clothes, expensive, she noticed absurdly, were shredded across his back, revealing wounds that made her stomach drop. Deep lacerations crisscrossed his spine, but that wasn't what made her freeze. The blood was wrong. It glowed faintly crimson in her flashlight beam, almost luminescent, like someone had mixed rubies into paint. And the wounds, they were closing, slowly, impossibly. The flesh was knitting itself together as she watched. "Sir?" Her voice came out strangled. "Can you hear me?" A sound rumbled from him, not quite human, somewhere between a growl and a groan. His hand shot out, fingers closing around her ankle with crushing force. Clara yelped, dropping to her knees. "I'm a nurse. I'm trying to help." The grip loosened, and when he turned his head, rain washing the mud from his face, Clara forgot to breathe. Beautiful. That was the only word her shocked brain could supply. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut diamonds, dark hair plastered to his forehead. But his eyes, they flickered between gray and something that looked like molten copper before rolling back. "A hospital," Clara said firmly, already calculating the nearest emergency room. "You need—" Too far. The words scraped out of him like broken glass. "Wounds like these. You could be bleeding internally. Not human." His eyes opened again, and this time they held hers with desperate intensity. "Please." Every instinct Clara possessed screamed her to call 911, but something in his voice, in those impossible eyes, stopped her. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the way his blood seemed to shimmer with its own light. Maybe it was because she had spent 12 hours watching death win, and she was tired of losing. "My cabin's close," she heard herself say. "Can you walk?" Getting him into her car took 10 minutes of struggling, his weight heavy and cold against her. He passed out twice. Each time Clara checked his pulse. Too slow, she thought, but steady. Wrong, but alive. Her cabin appeared through the trees like a lighthouse in fog. Clara half dragged him through the door, depositing him on her couch with a grunt. Her back would hate her tomorrow. Under the warm glow of her lamps, she got her first real look at him. Mid-30s, maybe, though something about his face suggested older. The wounds on his back had closed to angry red lines, but they weren't healing fast enough. Fresh blood, that strange luminous red, still seeped through his bandages. Clara worked on autopilot, falling into the familiar rhythm of trauma care. Clean the wounds, assess for debris. She pulled tiny shards of glass from his back with tweezers, noting how each piece seemed to sizzle faintly against his skin. Disinfect, bandage. His breathing evened out as she worked, that rumbling sound returning, but softer now, almost content. "What's your name?" she asked, taping the last bandage in place. "Lucien." His voice was clearer now, holding an accent she couldn't place. European, maybe. Old European. Yours? Clara. She wiped her bloody hands on a towel. Now tell me what you are, because those wounds should have killed you. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Direct, I appreciate that. He tried to sit up and winced. The answer would frighten you. I watched your blood glow and your flesh heal itself. I'm already frightened. Try me. Before he could answer, the first rays of dawn crept through her eastern window. The beam of light hit his arm, and Clara watched in horror as his skin began to smoke. Not metaphorically, actual wisps of gray smoke rose from his flesh, and the smell of burning meat filled the room. Lucian's scream was unhuman. Clara lunged for the curtains, yanking them shut with such force the rod nearly came down. Darkness swallowed the cabin again. Her hands shook as she grabbed more curtains, covering every window, every crack where light might enter. When she turned back, Lucian was staring at his blistered arm with an expression of resignation. "Vampire," he said simply. "I'm a vampire." Clara laughed. It came out high and slightly hysterical. "Right, of course, because this night couldn't get any weirder." "You don't believe me?" "I believe the sun just burned you. I believe your blood glows. I believe I should probably call someone, except I have no idea who handles this situation." She sank into her armchair, suddenly aware of how alone they were, how isolated her cabin sat in these woods. "Are you going to kill me?" "No." His voice was gentle, almost sad. "You saved my life, Clara. I owe you a debt far greater than you understand." "Then explain it to me, all of it, because I'm running on 3 hours of sleep and zero understanding of what's happening." Lucian studied her for a long moment. "Very well, but first you should know my enemies are still out there, the ones who forced my car off that road, who left me for dead. They'll be looking for survivors come nightfall." "How comforting." "I'm serious." He leaned forward, and Clara saw something ancient move behind his eyes. "By bringing me here, by tending to my wounds, you've marked yourself. My scent is all over this cabin now. If they come—" "If they come?" "Don't open the curtains," Lucian said quietly. "No matter what you hear, no matter who calls your name, when the sun sets, I'll be strong enough to protect you. Until then, we need darkness." Clara looked Wingdill's, now covered in thick curtains and blankets, turning her cozy cabin into a tomb. Outside, rain continued to fall. Inside, a vampire sat on her couch, wearing her bandages and speaking of enemies in the dark. She had thought tonight couldn't get stranger than glowing blood and healing wounds. She was about to discover how wrong she could be. Clara woke to silence, the kind of silence that felt wrong. No breathing, no movement, nothing. She bolted upright from the armchair where she had apparently dozed off, her neck protesting with a sharp crack. The couch was empty. Bandages lay discarded on the cushions, spotted with that strange, luminous blood that had already faded to brown. Clara touched them cautiously, completely dry. She checked her watch. 3:47 p.m. She had slept through most of the day. "Lucian?" Her voice echoed through the cabin, unanswered. She checked the bathroom, her bedroom, even the closets. Nothing. On her coffee table sat a single object that hadn't been there before, a medallion on a silver chain. Clara picked it up, feeling the weight of old metal in her palm. The pendant showed a winged serpent coiled around a crown, engraved with such detail she could count the scales. The back bore words in a language she didn't recognize. "A thank you gift from my delusional hallucination," she muttered, setting it down. "Perfect." The logical part of her brain, the part that had carried her through nursing school and countless emergency situations, insisted last night had been a dream, exhaustion-induced psychosis. She had probably found an injured hiker, treated him with her kit, and he had wandered off. The glowing blood, the burning skin, the word vampire, all fabrications of an overtired mind. Except the medallion felt very real in her hand. Clara spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning, trying to scrub away the evidence and her confusion. She threw the bloodied bandages in the trash, bleached the couch, opened all the curtains to let afternoon light flood the cabin. By 6 o'clock, she had almost convinced herself it had been a strange dream. Then the ground started shaking. It began as a subtle vibration, like a distant train passing, but her cabin sat miles from any tracks. The tremor grew stronger, rattling dishes in her cupboards, sending books tumbling from shelves. Clara grabbed the doorframe, her nurse's instincts checking for earthquake safety protocols. The shaking stopped as suddenly as it started. In the ringing silence that followed, Clara heard something else, a sound like wind through trees, except there was no wind. A rustling, a whisper of fabric, the soft displacement of air by many bodies moving in perfect synchronization. She walked to her front window, pulled back the curtain, and forgot how to scream. They covered her lawn like a dark sea, hundreds of figures in black cloaks that seemed to drink the fading daylight. They stood in perfect rows, utterly still, utterly silent. And as one, as if controlled by a single mind, they knelt. 300 pairs of eyes opened, red, glowing red like embers in the gathering dusk. Clara's legs gave out. She caught herself on the window ledge, her breath coming in short gasps. This wasn't real, couldn't be real. Mass hallucination, gas leak, something. A knock at her door. 3 measured raps. Polite and terrifying. "Miss Clara Torres," a woman's voice, cultured and calm. "We mean you no harm. May we speak?" Clara's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Her hand found her phone, but what would she even say? 911, there are 300 vampires on my lawn? Another knock, more insistent. "Miss Torres, we understand your fear, but protocol must be observed. The king's savior must be properly acknowledged." King! Clara's mind flashed to Lucien's face, that ancient quality in his eyes, the way he had spoken of debts and enemies. On trembling legs, Clara walked to the door. Every survival instinct screamed at her to run, hide, do anything but open it. But nurses didn't run. Nurses walked toward the crisis, not away from it. She opened the door 6 inches, keeping the chain lock engaged. A woman stood on her porch, tall and elegant in a military-style coat that probably cost more than Clara's car. Her hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing razor-sharp cheekbones. Unlike the kneeling figures behind her, her eyes were normal. Almost. They held an amber tint that caught the light strangely. "Miss Clara," she bowed, a precise movement that somehow conveyed both respect and danger. "I am Commander Sarah, First Blade of the Northern House. Last night you provided medical care to a man named Lucien." Clara's throat felt like sandpaper. He was injured. I'm a nurse. It's what I do." "Indeed." Sarah's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "What you did, Miss Torres, was save the life of Lucien Dracos, king of the vampire nation, lord of 7 houses, and master of the blood covenant." She gestured to the kneeling figures behind her. "You have invoked the blood debt." The what? An ancient law. Any human who saves the king's life becomes blood-bound to him and his clan. We are honor-bound to protect you, serve you, and defend you against all threats. Sarah's expression hardened. Unfortunately, this also makes you a target for every rival house, every enemy who would see our king fall, and every faction that opposes the throne. Clara stared at her, then at the 300 vampires kneeling on her lawn, then back at Sarah. "I want to wake up now," she whispered. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Miss Torres." Sarah stepped back, joining the kneeling figures. "The king will return at full dark to explain. Until then, we stand guard. Nothing living or dead will harm you while we draw breath.
As if on cue, all 300 vampires spoke in unison, their voices shaking the air. Blood to blood, life to life, we are bound. Clara closed the door, slid down to the floor, and stared at the medallion she still clutched in her hand. The winged serpent seemed to stare back, almost mocking. What would you do if 300 vampires knelt for you? Clara spent the next 2 hours watching through her window as the vampire army remained motionless on her lawn. They didn't shift, didn't speak, didn't even seem to breathe, like statues carved from shadow. She tried calling her sister, voicemail, her best friend, straight to voicemail, even 911, but the moment she started to explain, her throat closed up, words dying before they could form. Some kind of supernatural gag order, she realized with growing horror. At exactly 8:47 p.m., the temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Her breath misted in front of her face. Frost crawled across her windows in delicate patterns. And then he was simply there, standing in the center of her living room, as if he had materialized from darkness itself. Lucien. But not the broken, bleeding man she had bandaged. This Lucien wore armor, actual armor, black as midnight, etched with silver patterns that hurt to look at directly. A cloak of deep crimson fell from his shoulders, moving in a wind that didn't exist. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp, inhuman beauty of his face. And his eyes... God, his eyes burned with an inner fire that made Clara want to bow, to kneel, to... She shook her head violently, breaking whatever compulsion had gripped her. Get out of my house.
Lucien's expression flickered, surprise, then something like respect. You resist the thrall. Remarkable. He inclined his head, a gesture that somehow contained more respect than any bow. I apologize for the intrusion and for leaving without explanation this morning. The sun's approach gave me little choice. 300 vampires, Lucien! 300! Clara's voice rose. On my lawn! My neighbors! Your nearest neighbor is 4 miles away. I chose this location carefully. He moved closer, and Clara forced herself not to retreat. Clara, I need you to understand what happened last night. By healing me, by willingly offering aid without demand for payment, you triggered the blood covenant, a law older than most human civilizations. Sarah mentioned a blood debt. The debt is the consequence. The covenant is the cause. Lucien gestured, and images appeared in the air between them, shimmering projections of ancient text and diagrams. 3,000 years ago, my ancestor made a vow. Any human, brave or foolish enough to save a vampire king's life, would be granted the protection of the entire clan. It was meant to encourage peace between our species. Clara stared at the floating text, her brain struggling to process. And now I'm what? Under your protection? You are bloodbound to me, to my house, to my throne. His voice softened. I cannot undo this, Clara. The magic is absolute, but I swear to you. The window exploded inward. Clara screamed as glass shards rained down. A figure crashed through, impossibly fast, impossibly silent, landing in a crouch between her and Lucien. Silver blades gleamed in each hand, their edges crackling with violet energy. Found you, the attacker hissed. Female, Clara registered distantly, pale as paper, with white blonde hair and eyes like frozen chips of ice. Lucien moved like liquid shadow, shoving Clara behind him. House of Vaughn, you dare break sanctuary laws? Sanctuary? The woman laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You invoked the blood covenant for a human, Lucien. You've made yourself weak. The other houses won't stand for it. She lunged, blades aimed for his throat. Lucien caught her wrists, but Clara saw the strain in his posture. The violet energy on those blades was hurting him, burning his skin where they touched. The woman twisted, bringing a knee toward his ribs. Clara grabbed the fire poke from beside her hearth and swung it with every ounce of strength she possessed. The iron connected with the vampire's skull with a sickening crack. The woman snarled, stumbling sideways, and Lucien used the opening. His hand shot out, fingers transforming into claws that caught the light strangely and tore the blades from her grip. Outside, now. His voice dropped into a register that vibrated in Clara's bones. Command, pure authority. He dragged the assassin through the broken window. Clara ran after them, stopping on her porch as chaos erupted. The kneeling vampires exploded into motion. Sarah was suddenly there, her own blade drawn, as more attackers poured from the woods. 10, 15, 20, all wearing the same ice-white uniforms, all wielding those violet-edged weapons. The battle was like nothing Clara had ever imagined. Vampires moved faster than her eyes could track, their bodies blurring between positions. When they connected, the impact sounds were like thunder. Blood, that luminous, impossible blood, painted the grass in streaks of crimson light. Lucien stood at the center of it all, and Clara finally understood what king meant in his world. He didn't just fight, he commanded. Shadows peeled away from the trees at his gesture, wrapping around enemies like living chains. When one attacker got too close to Clara's porch, Lucien extended his hand, and the vampire's own blood rebelled, forcing its way out through eyes and mouth until the body collapsed. It was beautiful. It was horrifying. It was over in 3 minutes. The surviving Vaughn assassins retreated into the woods. Sarah's forces moved to pursue, but Lucien raised a hand. Let them run. They've delivered their message. He turned to Clara, his armor now splattered with blood, his eyes still burning with that terrible fire, but his voice, when he spoke, was gentle. Pack a bag. You can't stay here. Clara looked at her destroyed window, her blood-painted lawn, the vampire warriors forming their protective circle around her house. Where am I supposed to go? Lucien smiled, sad and ancient. Somewhere they'll never reach you, somewhere that hasn't seen sunlight in 400 years. He offered his hand. Welcome to my world, Clara Torres. I am truly sorry. Clara had exactly 7 minutes to pack. She threw clothes into a duffel bag with shaking hands, scrubs, jeans, her warmest sweater, her toothbrush, the photo of her parents, her nursing license, though what good that would do in a vampire stronghold she had no idea. The medallion went into her pocket, its weight somehow comforting. When she emerged, Sarah was waiting beside a black SUV that definitely wasn't there before. The king has gone ahead to secure the route. We'll follow in convoy. Stay low, stay quiet, and if I tell you to run, you run. Got it? Clara climbed in, her duffel clutched to her chest like a shield. 3 other SUVs flanked theirs, filled with armed vampires whose eyes scanned the darkness with predatory focus. The convoy pulled away from her cabin, and Clara watched through the rear window as her home, her safe, normal, boring home, disappeared into the trees. They had made it maybe 5 miles when Sarah's phone chimed. She answered, listened, and her face went carefully blank. Understood. What's wrong? They're not done. Sarah's voice was ice. They called in reinforcements. They're going to try to take you before we reach the cathedral. How many? 50, maybe more. Sarah met Clara's eyes in the rear-view mirror. They brought daylight weapons. Clara's stomach dropped. What's that? The lead vehicle exploded. The fireball lit up the night, flipping the vehicle end over end. Their driver swerved, barely avoiding the wreckage. Clara's seatbelt cut into her chest as they fishtailed wildly. Out, everyone out. Sarah kicked her door open, dragging Clara with her. They hit the asphalt, rolling. Clara's shoulder screamed in protest, but Sarah hauled Clara upright and toward the tree line. Behind them, vampires poured from the remaining vehicles, weapons drawn. The Vaughn forces emerged from the forest like pale ghosts. They wore black tactical gear, and each one carried blades that glowed with that sickening violet light. But some carried something worse, metal rods topped with blazing white crystals that burned brighter than searchlights. Artificial sunlight. The first beams swept across two of Sarah's warriors. Clara watched in horror as their skin bubbled and blackened. Flames erupted from their flesh. Their screams cut through the night as they collapsed, still burning. Clara, run. Sarah shoved her deeper into the woods. The cathedral is 2 miles north. Follow the... A Vaughn soldier appeared behind Sarah, blade raised. Clara opened her mouth to scream a warning. The soldier's head separated from his body in a spray of luminous blood.
Lucien stood where the vampire had been, his cloak billowing around him, his eyes no longer copper but pure crimson fire. His voice, when he spoke, didn't sound human at all. "You dare bring sunlight to my domain?" He moved, and Clara's brain couldn't process what she was seeing. One moment he was beside Sarah, the next he was in the center of the Vaughn forces, and they were dying, not fighting, dying. His hands moved like striking snakes, and everywhere he touched, vampires fell. When 3 tried to hit him with sunlight beams simultaneously, he simply gestured. The shadows rose. They peeled away from the trees, from the ground itself, forming a dome of absolute darkness that swallowed the artificial light. Inside that darkness, Clara heard screams, the sounds of breaking bones. When the shadows fell away, only Lucien remained standing. His armor was scorched, blood, his own and others, dripping from countless wounds. But he was smiling. It was the most terrifying expression Clara had ever seen. "Sarah, status." Sarah's voice was tight. 8 injured, 2 dead. They knew our route. We have a leak. "Deal with it." Lucien's eyes found Clara, and the crimson fire dimmed slightly. "Are you hurt?" Clara shook her head, not trusting her voice. She had just watched him kill 20 vampires in under a minute, had watched him command darkness itself like a weapon. This was what a king looked like when you threatened what was his. A sound from the road, footsteps, running. One Vaughn soldier had survived, fleeing back toward the highway. Lucien tensed to pursue, but Sarah caught his arm. "Let him go. Let him report back to his masters what happens when they threaten your bloodbound." Lucien hesitated, then nodded. "Burn our dead with honor. The injured come with us." Clara found herself being guided to an SUV that still had intact tires. Lucien slid in beside her, and she instinctively pressed against the opposite door. His eyes tracked the movement, and something like pain crossed his face. "I frightened you." "You killed them." Clara's voice came out smaller than she had intended. "You killed them. I know they were trying to kill us, but you didn't even hesitate." "No." He looked down at his bloodied hands. "I didn't, because hesitation would have meant your death, and that is unacceptable." "Why?" The question burst out of her. "Why does it matter so much? I'm just a nurse who made one stupid decision on a rainy night." Lucien was quiet for a long moment as the SUV started moving again, carrying them through the darkness toward a destination Clara couldn't imagine. "Because in 3,000 years," he finally said, "no human has ever looked at my wounds and seen something worth saving. You didn't see a monster or a king, you saw someone who needed help and you gave it." His crimson eyes met hers. "That kind of compassion is rarer than you know, and I will not let it be extinguished." "Would you sacrifice everything for someone who saved you?" Clara hugged her duffel closer, watching the forest fly past. Somewhere ahead lay a hidden fortress. Behind them, her normal life burned like those 2 vampires, consumed by forces she had never imagined existed. And beside her, a king who had just started a war to keep her alive. The cathedral appeared like a wound in the landscape, all broken spires and shattered stained glass, abandoned so long that trees grew through its roof. Of course the vampire stronghold would be hidden in a church. "Stay close," Lucian said, helping her from the SUV. His wounds had already begun healing, the burns fading to pink scars. They entered through a side door that looked rotted through, but Clara felt the hum of power as they passed the threshold. Wards, she realized, magic barriers disguised as decay. Inside, the floor gave way to stone stairs descending into darkness. Down they went, the air growing colder with each step, until they emerged into something impossible, a city underground, carved from living rock and lit by thousands of crystal formations that pulsed with soft blue light. Gothic archways stretched overhead like the ribs of some massive beast. Vampires moved through columned streets, their clothing ranging from medieval robes to modern suits, centuries of fashion existing simultaneously. "Welcome to Tenebris," Lucian said quietly, "heart of the Northern House, home to 1,500 vampires who haven't seen natural sunlight in 4 centuries. Clara's nurse brain noted details automatically: the perfect temperature for preserving bodies, the lack of any medical facilities, the way every vampire they passed stopped to bow to Lucian and to stare at Clara. "They can smell I'm human, can't they?" "They can smell that you're mine," Lucian said. His hand found her lower back, gently guiding her forward. "The blood bond has a scent. They know what you are, what you represent." They reached a massive hall where a council of elderly vampires sat in high-backed chairs, their faces sharp with suspicion. The eldest, a woman whose skin looked like parchment stretched over bone, spoke first. "You brought her here, to Tenebris? Have you lost your mind, Lucian?" "I brought her here to save her life." "And endangered all of ours." Another elder, male, slammed his fist on the armrest. "The blood covenant hasn't been invoked in 300 years for good reason. Humans bring nothing but chaos." "Humans brought you her." Sarah stepped forward, still bloodied from the battle. "Tonight, 50 Vaughn soldiers attacked with daylight weapons. Clara Torres didn't run, she didn't hide. She grabbed a poker and fought beside her king." The elders muttered among themselves. Lady Morgana's ancient eyes fixed on Clara with unnerving intensity. "Is this true, human?" Clara's throat was dry, but she forced the words out. "I hit one in the head. I don't know if that counts as fighting." A sound rippled through the hall. Laughter, actual laughter from several of the elders. "She has courage," Morgana acknowledged, "but courage doesn't change facts. The girl is a liability. Vaughn already knows about her. The others will follow. If we keep her here, we invite war." "War is already coming," Lucian said flatly. "Vaughn used daylight weapons on a main road. They've broken the Treaty of Shadows. With or without Clara, conflict is inevitable." "Then send her away, hide her somewhere remote, let the blood bond fade with distance." "The bond doesn't fade," Lucian's voice carried absolute certainty. "You know this, Morgana. Once invoked, the covenant is eternal. She is bloodbound to me, to this house, until one of us turns to dust." The silence that followed was suffocating. Clara felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her. These beings had lived through empires rising and falling, had seen countless humans born and die, and now they had to decide whether one more human was worth the risk. "I want to help," Clara heard herself say.
Every eye turned to her. Lucian looked like he wanted to stop her from speaking, but she continued anyway. "I'm a trauma nurse. I saw injured vampires outside. Burns, lacerations, wounds that won't heal properly because of those violet weapons." She stepped forward, her voice growing stronger. "You're about to go to war. You're going to have more wounded, and I'm guessing vampire medicine isn't exactly advanced, since you usually heal on your own." "You would tend to our soldiers?" Morgana's tone was unreadable. "Creatures who could drain you dry in seconds?" "I've treated gang members who threatened to kill me, addicts who tried to steal my supplies, and a guy who had literally just stabbed someone." Clara met the ancient vampire's gaze. "If you're bleeding, you're my patient. I don't really care what species you are." Another moment of silence. Then Morgara laughed, a sound like wind through dead leaves.
She shames us, brothers and sisters. A human offers healing while we debate politics. The elder rose from her chair, moving with surprising grace. Very well, Clara Torres. You may stay. Prove your worth to this house, and perhaps you'll unite us. She smiled, showing fangs. Fail, and you'll become a very expensive meal. Morgana, Lucian started. Peace, my king. I won't harm your pet. She waved a dismissive hand. Show her to the medical chambers. Let's see if human compassion can mend immortal flesh. As the council dispersed, Lucian led Clara through winding corridors to a series of rooms that looked like they had been carved yesterday. Clean stone, metal tables, and surprisingly modern equipment. Some of our kind tried to advance medical knowledge for injuries too severe for natural healing, but we've had no one to properly use it in decades. Wounded vampires were already being brought in, the soldiers from the highway attack. Clara rolled up her sleeves, her training taking over. I need clean water, bandages, and someone to explain how vampire physiology works, she said briskly. Also, I'll need assistants who won't faint at the sight of blood. Lucian watched her organize the chaos with growing admiration. You're remarkable, you know that? Clara, already examining a soldier with severe burns, didn't look up. I'm just doing my job. Now, are you going to help or are you going to stand there looking broody? Despite everything, Lucian smiled. As my lady commands. 3 days in Tenebris, and Clara had treated 47 wounded vampires. She had learned that their bodies rejected standard antibiotics, that violent burns wouldn't heal without a blood transfusion from another vampire, and that soldiers who had lived for centuries would absolutely whine like children about getting stitches. Hold still, Clara told the warrior currently on her table, a man named Victor who claimed to have fought in the Crusades. You have gentle hands for a human, Victor said through gritted teeth. Most of your kind would let us suffer. Clara swabbed the wound with a solution Sarah had provided, something derived from vampire blood that actually worked as an antiseptic. Most of my kind haven't met vampires, and most vampires haven't tried to protect me from assassination attempts, so I figure we're even. Word had spread through Tenebris, the human healer who worked without fear, who treated everyone from common soldiers to the king himself with the same careful compassion. Clara felt their attitudes shifting from suspicion to curiosity, to something almost like respect. She was finishing Victor's bandages when Sarah burst into the medical chamber. War Council, now. The king requests your presence. Clara blinked. Me? Why would... Because it concerns you. The council chamber was standing room only. Clara recognized the elders from before, but now they were joined by what looked like military commanders, vampires in various forms of armor, their faces hard with violence and experience. Clara gestured her forward. You should hear this. A female vampire with a shaved head and scars across her face stepped forward. Intelligence reports confirm House Vaughn has allied with the Huntsman's Guild. They're planning a coordinated assault. Clara's blood went cold. Huntsmen as in vampire hunters? Human vampire hunters, trained since birth to kill our kind. They've been mostly inactive for decades, but Vaughn has promised them something valuable enough to break the truce. Your guess is mine, Clara said quietly. You and something else. He tapped the map. An image appeared, a glowing crystal similar to the ones that had produced artificial sunlight. The Sun Shard, an ancient weapon capable of generating true daylight, not just UV radiation. With it, the huntsman could attack Tenebris directly. Where is it now? That's the problem. We don't know. It was kept in our vault, but... Lucian's jaw tightened. 3 hours ago, we discovered the vault had been breached. The shard is gone. The room erupted in angry voices. Accusations flew. Clara caught words like traitor and spy and execute them all. Lucian's fist hit the table, and silence fell instantly. We don't have time for paranoia. Vaughn will attack within 48 hours. They have to before we can relocate the shard or strengthen our defenses. Sarah, mobilize units. Morgana, activate the fortress wards to maximum. My king, a young vampire stumbled into the chamber, blood streaming from a wound on his head. The eastern gate, someone opened it from the inside. The words were barely out of his mouth when Clara felt it, a shift in air pressure, a wrongness that made her skin crawl. Then came the light, blazing white, burning light that poured through the eastern corridors like liquid fire. Vampires screamed as the artificial sunlight caught them, their flesh igniting instantly. The sun shard, Sarah drew her blade, they're already here. Chaos erupted. Warriors rushed toward the eastern gate. Elders fled deeper into the fortress. And Clara stood frozen, watching vampires burn, until Lucien grabbed her arm. You need to hide. I need to help them, she pointed to the wounded vampires being dragged away from the light. They're dying. Clara, I'm the only one here with trauma training. She pulled free, running toward the screaming. Behind her, she heard Lucien curse and follow. The medical chamber became a war zone. Vampires poured in with burns covering half their bodies, some barely conscious, others screaming in pain. Clara worked frantically, calling orders to anyone who could help. You, hold pressure here. Don't let him bleed out. Someone get me more of that blood solution. Her hands moved automatically, falling into the rhythm of triage. Assess, prioritize, treat. Again and again. She was stitching a soldier's torn throat when she felt the blade against her neck. Don't move, a voice whispered in her ear. Male, cold, familiar somehow. Clara froze. In her peripheral vision, she saw Lucien across the room coordinating the defense. He hadn't noticed yet. You're coming with me, the captor continued. The huntsmen pay well for king's pets, and I've grown tired of bowing to Lucien's mercy. Betrayal. From inside the house. The blade pressed harder, drawing blood.
Clara's mind raced. If she screamed, Lucien would come and probably get killed trying to save her while distracted. If she stayed silent, she would be taken, but everyone here would survive. She thought of the soldiers she had treated, of Sarah's rare smiles, of Victor joking about the Crusades, of Lucien standing between her and death again and again. Okay, Clara whispered. Don't hurt anyone else. I'll go. The traitor laughed softly. Smart girl. Now walk. They moved toward a side passage, slipping through the chaos. Clara caught one last glimpse of Lucien, his armor splattered with blood, his eyes burning as he fought to protect his people. Their eyes met across the room. She saw the exact moment he realized what was happening, saw horror replace tactical calculation, saw him start to move toward her. Then she was pulled into darkness, and Lucien's roar of rage echoed through Tenebris like thunder. The traitor dragged Clara through tunnels she hadn't known existed, service passages carved behind Tenebris's grand halls. His name was Demon, he finally revealed, once a general under Lucien's father. He made us weak, Demon hissed as they climbed toward the surface. The blood covenant, the peace treaties, refusing to feed on humans. We used to be apex predators, and he turned us into politicians. Clara's wrists were bound, but her mind was racing. So you sold out your own king for what? Money? For the old ways. Vaughn promised me a house of my own, a return to proper vampire rule. He shoved her forward. You were just convenient bait. Lucien's attachment to you makes him... Thunder cracked overhead. Except it wasn't thunder. The tunnel's ceiling exploded inward. Stone rained down as something massive descended through the opening. Not something, someone. Lucien landed in a crouch, and Clara barely recognized him. His eyes were pure crimson flame, his fangs fully extended, his armor seeming to absorb the light itself. Shadows writhed around him like living things, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. Demon. Release her. Now. Or what? Demon pulled Clara against him, blade at her throat. You'll kill me? Your own blood? You don't have the spine. Lucien's hand moved. Demon's blood turned to ice inside his veins. Clara felt the vampire behind her stiffen, felt his grip loosen as frost spread across his skin from the inside out. He managed one choked sound before collapsing, his body shattering like frozen glass. Clara stumbled forward, and Lucian caught her, cutting her bonds with claws that retracted the moment she was free. "Are you hurt?" His hands moved over her, checking for injuries with surprising gentleness despite the monster's face he still wore. Lucian, your eyes." "I know." He pulled back, and she saw the struggle in his expression. "When I thought you were taken, I lost control. The blood rage. It's difficult to stop once it starts." Sarah dropped through the hole in the ceiling, followed by a dozen warriors. "My king, Vaughn's forces are in full retreat. They're fleeing back to their stronghold." "How many did we lose?" 37 dead, 60 wounded, but Clara saved twice that number with her treatments. Lucian's crimson eyes found Clara's. "You should have hidden, should have let me protect you. I'm a nurse. I don't hide when people are dying. But you need to calm down. This rage, it's consuming you." "They tried to take you." His voice was barely human. "They opened my home to sunlight, killed my people. Vaughn must fall tonight." "Lucian." "Sarah, mobilize every warrior. We march on Vaughn within the hour." The attack force assembled with terrifying efficiency. 200 vampires, armed for war, their faces grim with purpose. Clara watched from the fortress gates as they prepared, her stomach twisting. "He's going to slaughter them," she said to Morgana, who stood beside her. "Yes." The ancient vampire's voice was neutral. "That is what kings do when their sovereignty is challenged." "There has to be another way." "There isn't. Not anymore." Morgana glanced at her. "You care for him." It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. "I don't want him to become a monster because of me." "Then go with him. You're the only one who can pull him back from the edge." Clara turned to stare at her. "You want me to go into battle?" "I want you to save your king from himself." Morgana's smile was sharp. "Isn't that what you do, Clara Torres? Save people?" 20 minutes later, Clara found herself in armor that didn't quite fit, riding in an SUV behind Lucian's forces as they descended on Vaughn's estate, a Gothic mansion on the outskirts of the city. The battle was already underway when they arrived. Vaughn's soldiers met them at the gates, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. Lucian moved through them like death incarnate, and Clara watched in horror as he showed no mercy. Then she saw him raise his hands, and the sky turned red. Blood. He was pulling moisture from the air, from the ground, from the bodies of the fallen, and weaponizing it. The crimson rain began to fall, and everywhere it touched Vaughn's forces, flesh dissolved. Screams filled the night. "Lucian, stop!" Clara ran toward him, ignoring Sarah's shout. She grabbed his arm, felt the power coursing through him. "Please, you're killing everyone." "They tried to take you from me." His voice was barely human. "They deserve—" "I'm right here. I'm safe. But if you do this, if you massacre everyone, you're no better than they are." Clara stepped in front of him, forcing him to look at her. "I didn't save your life so you could become the monster they claim you are." Something flickered in his crimson eyes. Recognition. Pain. "Please," Clara whispered. "Come back to me." The blood rain stopped. Lucian's hand dropped, and the power receded like a tide. His eyes faded from crimson to copper to gray. When he looked at her, he was himself again, exhausted, horrified by what he had almost done. "Ceasefire." His voice cracked across the battlefield. "Vaughn forces, stand down. Any who surrender will be spared." Slowly, weapons lowered. The surviving Vaughn vampires, maybe 50 of the original 200, knelt in submission. Word would spread, Clara knew. The vampire king had shown mercy because a human asked him to. Lucian collapsed to his knees, and Clara knelt beside him, holding him as he shook. "You stopped me," he whispered. "I was going to kill everyone." "I know, but you didn't." She cupped his face, making him meet her eyes. "You chose mercy. That's what makes you a king." The vampire court assembled 7 days after the Battle of Vaughn's fall.
Clara stood in the great hall of Tenebris, wearing a dress Sarah had provided, deep blue silk that felt absurdly formal. Around her, representatives from all 7 vampire houses gathered, including the surviving Vaughn nobles who had surrendered.
The past week had been a blur, treating wounded from both sides, mediating between houses that hadn't spoken peacefully in centuries, watching Lucian navigate the impossible politics of vampire society while trying not to lose himself again to the blood rage. And through it all, she had seen the change. Vampires who had viewed humans as prey or problems now looked at her with something close to respect. The human who had stopped a massacre, the healer who saved enemy soldiers, the woman who had tamed a king's fury. Now Lucian stood at the center of the hall, his armor replaced with formal robes of black and crimson. His face was carefully neutral, but Clara saw the exhaustion in his eyes. The weight of what he had almost done still haunted him. 7 days ago, Lucian's voice carried through the chamber, House Vaughn attacked Tenebris using human weapons and human allies. They sought to destroy the Blood Covenant and return us to an age of shadow and violence. The Vaughn representatives bowed their heads, expecting execution. But they failed, not because my forces were stronger, but because one human showed us a better path. He extended his hand toward Clara. Come forward. Clara's legs felt like water, but she walked to him, acutely aware of hundreds of immortal eyes watching her every step. Lucian knelt before her. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Kings didn't kneel, not to anyone, not even to other kings. Clara Torres, he said, his voice softer now, you saved my life on a storm-dark road. You saved it again when I would have drowned in rage and blood. You've shown my people that mercy is not weakness, that compassion is not surrender. He reached into his robes and withdrew the medallion, the winged serpent that Clara had found on her coffee table a lifetime ago. The blood debt bound you to me through ancient magic, but magic is merely power, and power without choice is tyranny. He held up the medallion. I cannot undo the covenant, but I can transform it, if you'll accept. Clara's throat was tight. Transform it how? The blood debt made you my responsibility. I propose a blood oath, a mutual vow between equals. He looked up at her, and she saw hope and fear warring in his expression. Not as master and subject, not as king and protected, but as allies, as partners. You're asking me to choose this? To choose your world? I'm asking you to help me build a better one. He gestured to the assembled houses. For 3,000 years, vampires and humans have existed in shadow, us hiding, you fearing, both sides killing when paths crossed. You've proven we can be more, that we should be more. Lady Morgana stepped forward. If you accept the blood oath, you become the bridge, recognized by all houses as intermediary between human and vampire. Your word would carry the weight of law, your protection absolute, your purpose clear. And what purpose is that? Asked Clara. To heal, Lucian said simply, to teach, to remind us that immortality doesn't excuse cruelty, and that mortality doesn't mean weakness. He offered her the medallion. Will you accept? Will you stay? Not because magic compels you, but because you choose it. Clara looked at the medallion, at Lucian's upturned face, at the assembled vampires who had gone from wanting her dead to waiting for her decision. She thought of her cabin, her quiet life, the normal she had lost. But she also thought of Victor joking through pain, of Sarah's rare smiles, of soldiers who called her Lady Healer with genuine affection, of Lucian standing between her and death again and again because one act of kindness had shown him he could be more than a monster. I have conditions, she said. Lucian's lips twitched. Name them. Medical facilities in every house, real ones, with proper equipment and training. Any vampire who wants to learn healing is taught by me personally.
Granted. Protection extended to other humans who help vampires. No more convenient feeding on innocent people. That will take time, but agreed. And Lucian, she knelt so they were eye to eye, if you ever start to lose yourself to the blood rage again, you come to me first, before it gets too far, before you do something you can't take back. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. I swear it. Clara took the medallion, feeling its weight, its history. Then, yes, I accept the blood oath. Lucian rose and placed the chain around her neck himself. The moment the medallion touched her skin, Clara felt something shift. Not compulsion this time, but connection, like a door opening between two rooms, allowing light to flow both ways. Blood to blood, Lucian said. Life to life, the assembled vampires responded in unison, their voices shaking the ancient stone. We are bound, Clara finished, and felt the words settle into her bones like truth. The celebration lasted until dawn forced the vampires to retreat to their chambers. Clara stood on the fortress walls as the eastern sky lightened, watching the world wake up. Lucian joined her, staying carefully in the shadows. Regrets? Ask me in 100 years. She smiled at his expression. Kidding, I'm still mortal, remember? For now, his tone was carefully neutral, though if you ever chose otherwise. One impossible decision at a time, Vampire King. She leaned against his shoulder, feeling the coolness of his skin through the silk. One at a time. Above them, the sun rose on a world that had changed, where a nurse from Ravenhurst Fitty had become the bridge between darkness and light, where mercy had proven stronger than rage. Could you choose an impossible world for the right reasons?